Why hello there. Brent here with Bring Your Own Tools, and on today's episode, if you want to see how we installed and manufactured this beautiful live edge slab headboard for your bed, keep on watching. Let us get started.
So my brother said to me one day, Brent, I want a one-of-a-kind bed. And I said, done deal, as long as it's a live edge headboard, which we found at Live Edge Hardwoods. And if you love slabs, you will love this place. I will leave a link in the description box below on where you can find this place, because it is magical how many slabs they have from all over the world.
One of the best things about this project is the fact that the hard part is over. Just trying to find a slab this beautiful and this gorgeous is the hard part. Once we have it, it's fairly simple to get it prepped and ready to go for a beautiful headboard. So we're going to be filling a few holes, sand this down smooth, put it on a French cleat, and guess what? Then we get it installed. Let's get to it. This would make a good surfboard though, as you can see.
This is a 9-foot long black American walnut slab that's probably close to 300 pounds. It is one solid, beautiful piece of wood, but there are a few cracks and holes that I want to fill, so I take some black Starbond adhesive and fill those cracks quickly and easily. And the nice thing about this product is that the kit comes with an accelerator, so you can actually spray the accelerator on the surface or on the product, and it almost instantly dries, which is very nice. And you don't have to be standing around wondering, when is the glue going to be dry? Oh, it's dry right now. As for this section, it is a thicker section, and I actually used a piece of tape as a dam and just filled it in with a bit more of this adhesive. Because this is a live edge slab, you may have some bark left over, and yes, it might look beautiful and gorgeous and you want to keep it, but I strongly suggest you actually remove it and sand it down smooth, because that will most likely become brittle, fragile, and fall off or break off at a certain point, and therefore you do not want that to happen, especially after it's set in its final resting place. Now on this slab, I had one end that I wanted to cut off clean, so I set up a guard in order to have a perfect line all the way across. However, because this slab is so thick, I was not able to cut all the way through with my normal circular saw. This thing is almost 3 inches thick, and therefore I was just a little too short, but the multi-tool always comes in handy in my time of need. As for sanding this beast, if there are rough spots and rough patches like this area, I take my grinder with 60 grit sandpaper and remove copious amounts of material with that first, and then go over the space with my random orbital sander. With the sander, however, I do suggest going over it with 60 grit sandpaper also, just on the random orbital mode, and then proceeding to go up to higher grits. You want to do this because you want to avoid any swirl marks at least as much as possible, and to ensure that using the same sandpaper grit will make life a lot easier, because you don't want to be spending copious hours trying to remove swirl marks in this beautiful slab. I've obviously started the sanding process with the sides of the slab because they need the most love and attention, and then work my way up to the top surface. As for the top surface, we are going from 60 grit to 100 to 150 all the way up to 220 grit sandpaper to ensure that we have a perfect buttery smooth finish in the end. Now, I'm sure not everyone's favorite part of a woodworking project is the sanding. However, I personally enjoy it, and therefore, even if it takes hours to do, it is more of a calming aspect because there's no distractions when you're sanding. It's just you and the sander. And you really want to take your time and due diligence at the sanding process, because you spent plenty of money on a slab like this, and therefore you want to ensure the best finish you possibly can at this point. And if you don't do the sanding portion right, the finish is never going to look right in the end. Because there are some obviously very unique edges on this slab, I take a soft sanding block and knock down all of those edges, which really does a nice job because the soft sanding block can contour around those edges very nicely, and therefore you get a very smooth finish. Once the sanding portion is complete, I then can proceed to make my way to finishing, or at least prepping for finish. I take mineral spirits and wipe off the entire surface of the slab, removing as much of the sand dust as possible. As I allow that side to dry, I can actually flip the entire slab over onto the back side and sand that side down. And as you can see, I did install a garage hoist, which makes life a lot easier, especially when you're trying to move very large objects by yourself. Now this is the back side, so I only sanded up to 100 grit because no one's ever going to see it. But I do remove all the sawdust particles that I can with mineral spirits and then take a tack cloth to the entire surface just to get up everything that the mineral spirits could not. And of course, if you know this channel, you know I love General Finish's Armaseal Satin Finish. This is the perfect finish in my personal opinion for walnut, and it just provides an extremely beautiful look and feel to this entire piece. It provides extreme durability because it's a urethane, but it has the beauty of an oil finish. I suggest having a foam brush for all those small tight knit areas, but the vast majority of this entire slab can be applied with a larger hand applicator like this. I always suggest applying one coat of finish to the back side, and then once it's dry, proceeding to flipping it over and applying the finish to the front side. That way you know at least the back side is sealed, but it's not going to have the emphasis that the front does.
So, for a slab this size, we need proper support, and for that, we're going to be using a French cleat system out of 1-inch thick plywood. Now it's going to be extremely strong because a French cleat system, the way it's actually positioned, has an extremely strong hold, and we're going to be putting 2 on the back side for plenty of support. Since this is going to be resting above someone while they're sleeping, got to make sure it's properly supported. Cut it up.
For this cleat system, one of the best materials to use in my personal opinion is plywood. This is apple plywood that's 1 inch thick, and it's extremely strong and durable. So I cut each piece 8 inches long and then proceeding to cutting them at a 45-degree angle in half. The other nice thing about a cleat system like this is the fact that because it's a long piece, you're able to connect to multiple studs at the same time. That makes a big difference when it comes to distributing the weight load appropriately. So in our situation, we hit 5 studs, and therefore we could distribute the load on 5 separate stud locations. More on that later. At this point in time, I would also highly suggest labeling each piece so you know exactly where each one needs to be placed on the wall or on your slab. I pre-drill my holes, and just keep in mind that these pieces need to be flush against the wall and against the slab. So if you're not using a flathead for your fastener, you may need to drill down a bit to ensure you have a flat surface when it's fully installed. I do also strongly suggest pre-drilling your holes in your walnuts so you have a nice snug fit with no cracking. One of the most important things at this point is just to ensure you have the proper spacing on both sides. Each cleat was 16 inches from the top of the top cleat to the top of the bottom cleat. At this point, it's very nice because the bottom is completely done and we can just flip it over thanks to our garage hoist. And did I mention there is a video on how to install a garage hoist? Keep that in mind. The application of the finish is a bit different on the front than the back because we are going to be applying multiple layers of finish on the front side. We first apply a nice cohesive layer on the sides as well as the front of this surface, wipe off the excess within 5 to 10 minutes, and that is an important step because if you do not remove the excess finish, it becomes extremely tacky and will ruin your finish overall. Keep that in mind. I use a clean, lint-free cloth to remove all of the excess, and once it's all removed, I let it dry for a couple hours and then proceed to apply a second coat. Same exact process, apply it in a nice cohesive manner all the way across the surface, and then remove the excess within 5 to 10 minutes. Then I let that dry overnight and come back to it the next morning. At this point in time, the slab looks beautiful, but it doesn't feel as smooth as I want it to. So I go over the entire surface with a buffing pad and then took a tack cloth to remove all of the nubs that the buffing pad left behind. I pour a small amount of finish and apply a third coat over the entire surface. I just use a clean cloth as an applicator and then immediately remove the excess to ensure we have a nice smooth finish in the end. As we wait for our finish to dry, I proceed to figure out exactly where dead center is on our bedroom wall and then determine how many studs we're actually going to be able to hit. As I noted earlier, we want to hit as many studs as possible in order to distribute the weight evenly among all of the studs. I pre-drill my holes on the cleats and set my fasteners in place and then install my top cleat. Now there's two aspects that you want to ensure for proper installation. One is making sure that the actual cleat itself is perfectly level, and two, you want to double and triple check your measurements to ensure that the space in between the top and bottom cleat are the same on both the slab as well as your wall, which is that 16-inch mark. Very important. But you know what else is very important? Having a helping hand when trying to lift a very large, very heavy item upstairs. Keep that in mind and protect your back. But guess what? Once we have this slab in place, this headboard is done. This 9-foot long, 300-pound behemoth is absolutely stunning and completely transforms any space you can possibly imagine. I'm so glad that I'm a part of this project, and the beauty and the warmth that this piece creates into this space is stunning and is truly one beautiful, sexy beast. But guess what? I'm not leaving you hanging yet, because we need to build a bed. That's coming up next week. Oh yeah.